In this video, I show you my 3D board and painted miniatures from Massive Darkness 2. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of January of 2023, we have two $25 credits towards LV427. Also, there is a channel code, GamingGeek20, for a 20% discount off of your first order. They're also giving two $40 pledges towards the upcoming Sunken Citadel Kickstarter, which is launching January 30th. This is a collaboration between LV427 and Antimatter, who makes Deep Wars. $50 credit towards Terranify store, where you can purchase STLs, prints, or printed and painted terrain. Two pledges towards the current relaunch of the Old Librarist Kickstarter campaign. My original magnetic dungeon and cave set from Fat Dragon Games. And this just in from Gutshot Games, they are offering a pledge for their current stage top 3D printed gaming table STLs. That's going on right now. Go ahead and use the link below to check out their Kickstarter. But if you've always wanted a gaming table and couldn't make one, go ahead and check this out as an option. And then finally, we have $100 going towards this month's crowdfunder, which my Patreon supporters have voted upon, which is the STL files from this Pirates Kickstarter. So go ahead, again, use the link below to check out this Kickstarter. And use the link below to go to my Patreon page if you want to see the full list. And to become a Patreon supporter, all it takes is $1 to have an opportunity to be chosen by Bob for one of these gifts. I am going to be announcing Bob's picks this upcoming Sunday, January 29th, at our weekly Sunday night Discord video hangout. So become a Patreon member and join us there. So I mentioned in last week's video where I highlighted Moonshine Miniatures LED lit 3D prints. I was making all of those in order to use it for my 3D board for Massive Darkness 2. Now I've managed to paint up all of the miniatures that comes in the base box, as well as Heavenfall the expansion. And then I also bought the Cockatrix expansion, actually from Massive Darkness 1, but all of the Massive Darkness 1 characters and enemies are usable in Massive Darkness 2. Now, I didn't back the Kickstarter, and you can actually purchase this game if you want, and you're not going to lose out a whole lot on the mountain of minis that usually accompany CMON's crowdfunding campaigns, as I found that there is plenty found in the base box, as well as if you like the campaign version, Heavenfall, you can buy into that as well. And I highly suggest that you buy the upgrade pack, which is only $12, which will triple the number of different minions and bosses that you're going to be able to field. Now, I don't have those miniatures, but I have plenty that I can proxy. You can actually proxy them with the miniatures that come in Massive Darkness 2, but I also have a ton of miniatures behind me that I can proxy in for that as well. But if you want to increase the variety of the monsters and of the bosses and roaming monsters, that's a cheap and easy way to do that. Aside from the board, I did also 3D print the card holder from Angry Owl Board Games. This is a free file that's found on Thingiverse. Links in the descriptions below if you want to check that out. But I printed out two of those because it is definitely a must need for the number of cards that you're going to be managing for this game. Especially if you have Heavenfall, which doubles the number of levels that you can get to. Typically, you only go up to 5th level in the base box, but in the campaign version of Heavenfall, you can make it all the way up to 10th level. So far, other than the Cockatrix box, I have not bought any of the other possible miniatures that Massive Darkness 2 did come with. If you wanted different kinds of heroes to play with or different classes, there are a couple other boxes, expansion boxes, that are available. I found that the 6 classes that come in the base box is plenty, and if I get bored or want to try out more, I can go and purchase those. But for now, this is plenty of miniatures, and honestly, I don't want to paint that much more. Also, all of this terrain is from my Zombicide 3D board. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check that out here. But I did have the intention of using that board for this as well, because Massive Darkness is based off of the same terrain tiles that Zombicide Black Plague has. So this works out really well. If you're going to go through the trouble of making a 3D printed terrain for Zombicide, you might as well also pick up Massive Darkness. And the only other thing that you have to do is come up with a way to distinguish the squares that have lights. And this is where Moonshine Miniatures, their various lamps and lighting features works perfectly, because I place these lanterns and various light up objects into the square so that I know that those squares are in light. Because the whole premise of the game is that you gain bonuses if you actually are attacking from the dark, which I think is sort of counterintuitive, as you are a light bringer as a hero, but you have been trained specifically to fight in the dark. So when you're in dark spaces on the board, you gain bonuses. And because I didn't want to paint up specific light and dark tiles, but wanted to just use the ones that I had for Zombicide, using these little lights is a perfect way to distinguish which of the squares are in light and which are in darkness. And as you can see, it makes the board even that much more awesome. I really thought that my Zombicide board was really cool, but adding these light elements onto the board makes it super cool. And I won't tell you which one of the scenarios this one is set up to be, but it is one of the Heavenfall scenarios, and it's the one where you need to go and gather up these different shards in order to create a demon artifact. And these crystals are perfect markers for us to grab that objective and to be able to bring it here to this forge to create the demon artifact. So all of these elements work perfectly, along with these gateways or portals where more minions and monsters are spawning. So it just worked out perfectly, and I don't think Moonshine Miniatures necessarily had this game in mind, but the file set that he kickstarted and I ended up getting, and that's also available for purchase now, only for $16. You can get all of these files. It just fit perfectly with this game. Obviously, in the dungeon, you're not seeing sort of these house walls, but again, I just sort of like the variety, and thematically, we can say that this is the denizens of hell, which is found in sort of more of a Middle Ages town. But hey, I don't really care. I think there's plenty of flavor and plenty of cool factor here that you can look a little bit beyond that. And because this is magnetic and modular, you can recreate any of the maps that's found in the base rulebook as well as the Heavenfall campaign. Also, I am soloing the Heavenfall campaign using 2 heroes. And because of that, you don't actually have to paint up all of the minions, because the number of minions that you field are the number of heroes that you're playing with. So in all honesty, I could have just painted 2 minions along with the boss leader for each grouping, but you know, I don't mind. I did paint up all 6 of the minions because I might play this game with 6 people, and that's one of the things that I like about this game, is that it can support 6 players. But if you're going to be soloing it, you can true solo with just 1 hero, but I wanted to play 2 just to have a little bit of synergy. And you're going to play at low player counts, just know that you don't have to end up painting all of the minions. And I do know that a lot of the people, because one of the criticisms of this game is that overall the minions aren't super distinct from each other, people end up just using the same miniatures for a grouping sort of randomly, rather than specifically assigning the miniature to match what's on the card. But of course, I'm in it for all of the immersion, all of the flavor. So I did end up painting all of the miniatures and all of the roaming monsters as well as bosses. I really think this boss is super cool looking, as well as this guy, which is so unusual and so different. Some of the other ones are a little bit more standard. Even Michael here, this boss, I'm not super impressed with the sculpt, even though he's supposed to be the major boss to fight in Heavenfall. I just like this one way more, just because it's so unique and creative and colorful. But some of these other wandering monsters, for example, like this guy here, looks really cool, as well as this one. I really like how he turned out. And to paint these up, I did primarily just spray paint them white and then used contrast colors in order to paint these up really quickly. I didn't even bother doing a zenithal, just spray painted everything white in order to make it easy to paint up because I needed to get all of these finished up relatively quickly. Also, I do have some 3D elements for furniture, example of some of these traps. I do want to print up either more forges or print up actual anvils, 3D anvils, as that's one of the elements that's also here on the board. But overall, I think having this 3D board just makes it that much cooler. So what are my thoughts about the game? You know that my favorite genre is actually dungeon crawlers, and I'm of two minds. I actually did play this game with some friends, and as a one-shot, it's actually really fun to be able to go from 0 all the way and level up really quickly. So in this game, you level fairly quickly and you get a bunch of loot. So there's a relatively steep power spike that you get to experience in just one game. And a lot of people opt not to do the campaign, the Heavenfall campaign, but instead, you know, there's enough scenarios where you can just do one-shots and start from 0 and go all the way up in each scenario. And that's one of the fun things, is that you're going to be leveling up quickly, and that's super satisfying. Being able to pick different skills, being able to try out different build outs for your character. And as many people have said, one of the best things is that each hero that you play is really distinct and really unique. And so the replayability is trying out different heroes rather than just sticking to one, because they are fairly different from each other. But it still does have that simplistic feel that Zombicide has. And right now, Zombicide Black Plague is sort of my go-to game for, you know, large numbers of people. We've played up to 10 people with that game because it is easily approachable. It's quick to be able to teach, and you can have a lot of people playing that game. But I would say that Massive Darkness 2 is sort of a little step above that. It's still a beer and pretzels kind of game where the rules aren't super complicated, but there's an additional factor of managing your cards and figuring out the best strategy for how you want to work things out with upgrades for your character. But it isn't super complicated, you know, like Gloomhaven, where you have to really manage your cards super well, or it isn't really difficult like Kingdom Death Monster. And in some ways, I would say it's even a little bit easier than Shadows of Brimstone. Even though I have a tendency to like my dungeon crawlers to be a little bit more complex and have more meat to it, I'm finding it really enjoyable to solo the Heavenfall campaign, and I definitely do want to play this game with larger groups of friends to have those one-shots and going through the book, just doing the one-shot campaigns rather than doing the Heavenfall campaign altogether. And I like the fact that you can purchase the game now. It's readily available. Again, buy the base box, and then if you want to do the campaign, do Heavenfall. And I highly suggest that you also get the upgrade pack, again, for only $12. Because you get all of the cards for Massive Darkness 1, heroes, bosses, and monsters, including all of the Kickstarter exclusives. So that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed looking at this awesome board as well as all of the painted miniatures. Again, use the link below to go to my Patreon page to get in on this weekend's GGGGs. Otherwise, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.